Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm just letting a few more people kind of jump on here and then we'll get rolling. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. Again, thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. It's brought to you by Mix It Up. My name is Michelle Allison, and I'm the Associate Publisher of Top Crop Manager. And this is the second of 3 resistance management webinars that we're hosting. And today I'm joined by Adam Pfeffer, Row Crop Agronomic Systems Manager with Bayer. Today during our session, Adam will discuss the history of herbicide resistance, managing glyphosate-resistant weeds in corn and soybeans across Canada, including waterhemp, Canada fleabane, and resistant kochia. And he'll advise on some resources you can use to help you manage these weeds as well. Big special thanks to Mix It Up by Bayer Crop Science for sponsoring our session today. From seed to harvest, Bayer is focused on delivering top performing solutions to address some of your toughest farm challenges. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees and registrants approximately 24 hours after our live broadcast. This session is scheduled to run for approximately 45 minutes. Following Adam's presentation, we'll open up the floor for questions. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them into the questions tab found on the GoToWebinar panel on your computer screen. This webinar has also been approved for 1 CCA CEU credit in crop management. Further instruction for submissions will follow the presentation if you did not submit your CCA number when you registered for today's webinar. And without further ado, I will let Adam take it away.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully everybody's, I guess, comfortable in your home under these uncertain times. So, yeah, the topic for today that I was asked to present on was just managing resistant weeds in corn and soybeans, and really focusing in on glyphosate-resistant weeds, something that we've been dealing with depending on which part of the country you're in for quite a number of years now. It's certainly not a new topic, but just want to cover a few highlights for today. Let's see if I get my slides to advance here. There we go. So as Michelle alluded to, I'll give a brief history of herbicide resistance globally and here in Canada. I will focus in on kochia, fleabane, and waterhemp and provide some comments with regards to those 3 weeds in corn and soybeans, and try and touch on a few different situations across Canada, and hopefully get some thought processes going with everybody around managing of those weeds. I'll touch very briefly on what our current and future trait pipeline looks like on the soybean side, as well as a couple quick comments on corn. And then, yeah, review a couple resources that are available to growers, depending on which part of the country you're in. There's lots of resources you can reach out and get more information on how to deal with managing herbicide-resistant weeds. Certainly not a new topic, and one that we spend a lot of time talking about as an industry, and it's very difficult to, I would say, move the needle and get ahead of Mother Nature on this front as we think about the different situations across Canada. So just a few slides here on kind of to frame up the whole conversation around resistance. And the first picture here I'll stop on is a picture I grabbed from Charles Getty's greenhouse in Lethbridge. And he was screening the current, I guess the last screen or provincial survey of kochia in Manitoba. And you can see a few of these populations certainly have quite a few survivors in the screen, and you can see a few populations are quite clean. So it really, to me, speaks to the diversity that we have, that we deal with in our fields year in and year out in different areas, and certainly the agronomic practices and management level of management that each grower has on their operations has a big determining factor on what resistant weeds they're working with in their fields. So a bit of background globally on global herbicide resistance. This information's off weedscience.org. It's a global archive where any academic or industry person can post information about resistant weeds, and it's kind of tracked on a global basis and tallied up. But you can see certainly long history of resistance dating back to the 60s here in Ontario, but certainly the 70s with atrazine, a lot of overusage of triazines when they were initially introduced. You can see the Group 2s were introduced in the early 80s, and they had a very rampant uptake of resistance development globally in numerous species. You can see the Group 1s, and today's focus will be Group 9 or glyphosate, certainly starting I guess around year 2000, late 90s, early 2000. You can see it's on its trend upwards, and you can see the other herbicide families here. So Group 4, the auxin family, Group 4, the PPO inhibitors, Group 27, HPPDs. Only a couple cases there globally, but still on the tally. And in Canada, this data is current as of 2018. You can see we're at 76 unique biotypes across the country, and continuing to climb. So again, herbicide resistance isn't new. Anytime we overutilize a single mode of action, we're going to lead ourselves into trouble with weed resistance development. And years back when triazine or atrazine was first used in corn, when 1 pound stopped working, growers went to 2 and kind of ratcheted up the use rates, and eventually that didn't work. And Group 2s, once they were introduced, a lot of usage in soybeans because they were very effective, but again, overutilized single modes of action, and Mother Nature adapted quite readily. And then you can see broken down by province. Obviously, the heavier or more intense the ag is in each province, really relates to the amount of weeds, unique biotypes that are resistant within each province. So my home province here of Ontario certainly leading the way, Manitoba in a close second, and Alberta and Saskatchewan, and then followed by Quebec. So again, this data is current as of 2018. Certainly there has been a few additions to the list since then, as there always will be. So but again, fairly current information there. And really, when herbicide resistance becomes the most challenging to deal with is when we start layering in multiple resistances within the same species. So you can see here, 2 modes of action quite prevalent, 3, 4, 5, 6, and even 7 down here at the very bottom. There is now documented cases of waterhemp and palmer in the U.S. Resistant to 6 and 7 different modes of action. And when you start thinking about that and the challenges that can lead to, and how many options that growers do not have access to anymore, it certainly becomes quite a challenge. And we certainly have to think outside the box. I'll touch on a few points in my conclusions, but just around integrated weed management, crop rotations, cover crops, and a few other things that I think we need to start thinking about as these populations become more challenging to manage with the use of herbicides alone. And really, another aspect of the whole herbicide industry is it's very difficult to develop and launch a new mode of action. And really, what I've done here is shown a timeline of the major herbicide modes of action here globally and when they were introduced. And I highlighted a few with red circles here just to really show kind of the timeline. So our synthetic auxin or Group 4, Fluxapyr, 2,4-D, dicamba, that herbicide family was discovered back in the 40s. Our atrazines, photosystem 2 inhibitors, Group 5s in the mid-50s, Group 15s in the 60s, PPO, again, late 60s. You can see here glyphosate or Group 9 Roundup back in the early 70s, Group 1s, 2s, and the latest one that is really prevalent in our herbicide systems here in Canada, Group 27s, was initially discovered in the early 80s, and that's I guess my vintage around 35 years ago. So we haven't seen a new novel mode of action launched in globally in quite a number of years, and there's been a little bit of conversation around new stuff coming in the pipeline. I know a few weeks ago we announced globally to our shareholders that we had a new novel mode of action in the development pipeline, but even that chemistry, if it makes it through the rigors of the regulatory process, is still well over a decade away. So we're not anywhere close to a new novel chemistry. And we've certainly had lots of herbicides enter the marketplace within each of these herbicide families. Certainly the PPO inhibitors saw products like sulfentrazone, flumioxazin added, saflufenicil from BSF. So we continue to discover chemistries within each one of these families, but as far as a new novel way to kill weeds, we really haven't had one for quite a number of years. And that's really speaks to the challenges, again, that we have when we start losing tools at our disposal. And really, what in the herbicide world, a lot of the combinations that companies are coming out with today, premixes, co-packs, are really trying to find different effective modes of action, and what is old is new again in the herbicide world predominantly. Just a couple trends in eastern and western Canada. One of the biggest challenges, obviously, dealing with glyphosate resistance specifically, is just the amount of tank mixing that happens. You can see these slides are a season out of date, but we do have a trend towards a higher percentage, both east and west, of adding a tank mix partner. But we still have a long ways to go. And previously in our legacy Monsanto company, we had our effort to program tank mix partners with Roundup, and we continue to do that today with our Bear Value Mix It Up program in the marketplace. And we do have some fairly good herbicides available with some programming dollars behind them, but you can see we do have a long ways to go. And certainly this trend is increasing as the presence of glyphosate-resistant weeds increases as well. Next slide here just kind of depicts the U.S. marketplace and the timeline of when Roundup Ready traits were first introduced. And this is specific to the soybean market, but really you could translate this to corn as well. So back in 1996, really when Roundup Ready beans were first introduced into the marketplace, you can see our Group 2 chemistry was very extensively used in soybeans. Again, almost 50% of the revenue coming from that single family. And then 1999, that was almost switched fully by the use of glyphosate or Roundup. And you could see that trend continued to about 2007, when just about 3/4 of the spend in the U.S. soybean business was just using Roundup or glyphosate. And you can see the expenditure from growers continued to decrease, right? Which from a grower, when I put my farmer hat on, is a good thing for the bottom line. But then when we start thinking about the challenges that we've had with pigweeds and other resistant weeds since then, you can see the trend upwards, and the chemistry mix that is currently used. And again, this is updated to 2016. I'm sure this pie chart would look a little bit different today or after the 2019 season, but you can see, again, glyphosate is still utilized extensively. Group 2s here in red. Our Group 15s here occupy a significant portion of the marketplace as well. And that's really driven on controlling our waterhemp and palmer populations in the U.S. And you can see here with PPOs, again, very effective, or can be very effective on those amaranth species. So you can see, again, this trend in the U.S. marketplace, and I expect if we did this similar analysis for Canada, we would see a similar trend, but probably pushed out to 2014, 2015, and now it's likely going back the other way. So again, as resistance develops to glyphosate, it is very effective chemistry and has been for a long time, and it was really easy to just go in with 2 shots of Roundup and call it good. It controlled everything in your field, but it's challenging when we start dealing with resistance. And certainly there's no chemistry out there that is immune to developing some herbicide resistance. And one of the biggest tools that we have at our disposal is really around crop rotation. I think this is something that we do quite well here north of the border, and certainly in most provinces and areas. But anytime we can introduce a new crop into the rotation, we give ourselves increased diversity of herbicides that we can utilize, and also switch up the germination patterns and a few other things around weed populations. So this picture here is fairly good to depict that. These are two fields in Essex County. This picture was taken back in 2010 when giant ragweed really first showed up in growers' fields to a broad extent. Again, two no-till soybean fields in Essex County. The grower on the right, this is all glyphosate-resistant giant ragweed in his field, was continuous soybeans for numerous years, no tillage utilized, no crop rotation, and only used glyphosate or Roundup in that scenario. Whereas the grower on the right-hand side followed a fairly regimented 3-crop rotation with corn, soybeans, wheat, utilized other chemistries outside of Roundup in 2 of those 3 seasons, I believe, and you can see the difference just in that management practice. So, it can be overwhelming if you're a grower in this situation. Certainly, we've seen a lot of this as growers have figured out how to manage giant ragweed, but with Canada fleabane now, it can certainly be overwhelming. But that's when we need to start doing our homework and try to get on top of it as quick as we can. So getting down to more specific on the weeds that we deal with here in Canada, obviously kochia is a very dominant weed in Western Canada, has been for many years in all crop rotations. First developed or identified resistance, I believe, in 2012 or 2014, and it has continued to spread in through Western Canada. Giant ragweed was the first one that showed up on our doorstep. I remember the first time I went to see the first field that was identified. It was right on the Windsor Airport site. The grower was locked into a soybean rotation because it was right beside the runway. Only utilized Roundup or glyphosate for over a decade. This weed biotype developed resistance and took off, and it was quite interesting to see that situation. Canada fleabane, again, I believe showed up around 2010 in Ontario, and it's very prone to developing a large distribution pattern, has managed to spread across most of Ontario and starting into Quebec, and certainly very prevalent all through the U.S. as well. Common ragweed showed up again in Essex County near Windsor, Ontario. This population I thought would expand quite a bit quicker than what it has, but we really haven't seen common ragweed expand very much, and I think part of that is the fitness penalty that resistance population has. It just doesn't seem to produce as much seed, and it's not nearly as aggressive as its susceptible biotype. So I think that one, it's still here and there down in Essex County, but really hasn't been a focus for many growers. And then the latest one to show up, I think in 2014 was the first year Peter Sickma got a call on it, is Waterhemp. And that's the one that I'm most concerned about going forward. And certainly it's our next challenge relative with Palmer amaranth. So again, I'll focus a few comments around kochia, Waterhemp, and fleabane for the rest of this presentation. But at the end, if anybody has any questions on common or giant ragweed, I can certainly field them as well. So looking at kochia specifically, it was first identified in 2012 in Alberta during the provincial weed surveys, and certainly something that was on everybody's radar for quite a number of years. And where it was first found is really historically a fairly strong fallow, chem fallow rotation, dry land scenario. So a lot of use of glyphosate or Roundup over the years, perhaps not a lot of diversity in what tank mixes were being used, and the weed did develop there. So you can see in 2012, just a few populations identified in red there as resistant, lots identified as susceptible. But when the survey was reconducted in 2017, you can see the amount of resistance that spread fairly quick, and you can see the different mode of action as well. So you got group 2 plus glyphosate in orange, group 2 plus group 4 in blue, and then a 3-way resistant population to 2, 4, 9 in green. So certainly this weed is a tumbleweed. It's very prone to moving very quick, and those that are dealing with it is it's pretty obvious when there's a problem. So again, that's Alberta. Saskatchewan identified in 2013 during the provincial survey. I believe the survey was completed last year, and I'm sure folks at Ag Canada are just screening that population now. But I would expect this map to look very similar to what Alberta did on the previous slide. And then in 2013 in Manitoba, you can see 2 populations confirmed with moderate levels of resistance. In 2018, you can see how much that is increased, moderate and high level resistance. So again, that kind of relates back to the picture I showed a few slides ago in the greenhouse during those screening flats. Those populations where some may have 1 survivor, some may have 100% of the seed or plant survive, and everything in between. So certainly the amount of selection pressure that you apply on those fields and in those situations has a big driver on the level of resistance in those populations. So I would say once you're certainly at that moderate to high level resistance, depending on the weed species and its ability to develop in the seed bank and longevity, you're really in for a career-long challenge to deal with that weed. And kochia is one of those weeds. It's been identified to not have a long seed life, which is both good and bad. And there is a little bit of debate in the literature around that. But if a weed has a short shelf life in the soil, you get a high percentage of that population germinate year in and year out. Whereas you have something like waterhemp that can stick around for 10, 15, 20 years. That seed is more prone to cause challenges season long. So with respect to soybeans, last year we have done quite a bit of work over time around kochia, but last year I ran another protocol focused on a few tank mix partners, thinking about our Extend soybean system that is in Western Canada. You can see here Roundup by itself, there are quite a few kochia escapes. Low rate Roundup Extend cleaned out a few of them, but again, not enough chemistry there. When we look at the mid rate, you can see a nice rate response in the amount of weeds in general in those plots. And at the high rate, the 2 liter per acre rate, you can see pretty much clean the kochia out. But again, growers that are in this situation, relying on one effective mode of action, is a short-term game and something that needs to be thought about from long-term sustainability and incorporating other modes of action. So one chemistry that is obviously in the bear camp around metribuzin or Sencor, an older chemistry that's hasn't been utilized a lot in soybean production, a little bit in lentils and potatoes in the west. But we do see nice activity with the dicamba group 5 chemistry there on not just the kochia, but also all the other weeds, or most of the other broadleaf weeds in this trial area. When we look at a couple options from the new farm camp, Roundup Extend plus Valterra, so straight flumioxazin, again, very sharp on kochia in particular. And when we stack the flumioxazin with pyroxasulfone with Fierce, again, very clean treatment here. In all the locations we had, this treatment was exceptionally clean. So again, from a stewardship standpoint, weed efficacy-wise, this treatment here is a very effective treatment. And obviously the question around costs comes up in any of these conversations when we start talking about tank mix partners. And certainly economics does have a big driver in the decisions that we make as farmers. But when we're dealing with challenging weeds like this, I think we have to reset our expectations around what the economics look like. And then from the FMC camp, so sulfentrazone or straight up authority, again, looks very good. And then Authority Supreme looks good as well. So again, there's a couple of good options in soybeans to tank mix with our dicamba-based products. Another good product from a burn down standpoint is saflufenicil, another group 14 or heat complete from the BSF camp. So there are options in both Roundup Ready and Extend soybeans for Western Canada. And just one slide on the corn front. Again, similar chemistry from a pre-standpoint, Group 14, Heat Complete, Volterra Fierce, or Roundup Extend, Extendamax. And then in the post-emerge corn markets, Armazon, again, a Group 27, Topramazone, I believe, very common herbicide in Western Canada in corn from BSF. Activity by itself, but likely better activity with atrazine. I put Shieldex in here. That's a new chemistry, Group 27 topyrolate, I believe was introduced commercially last year across Canada. And it's, I guess, claim to fame is water hemp management. They don't have kochia on the label yet, but I'm assuming that they will develop that because Group 27s are quite effective. Bromoxynil or partner plus atrazine, again, another option from our camp, and dicamba as well from that post-emerge standpoint. I put a comment in here more on the way, most likely. Certainly as we see weeds like kochia develop and water hemp come into the marketplace and the corn acreage expanding, I expect that there will be quite a bit more activity around bringing herbicide options to certainly Manitoba and the Red River Valley to help deal with these weeds. So not sure exactly what that'll look like, but I'm sure some of the chemistries that we have at our disposal in Eastern Canada will likely make their way west here in the next few years. So that's what I wanted to cover on kochia, and if there's any additional questions, we can hit on them at the end. The next weed that I'll jump into is Canada fleabane. Again, this one showed up in, I guess, in 2010, right down here in Essex County. I first saw it in a research trial in 2009, and it's spread quite dramatically, very quickly across Ontario. And this map is obviously a few years out of date from Peter Sycamore. Most of these counties would be lit up now. Survey work is essentially finished on this weed because it's essentially found just about everywhere. Again, a windblown seed. And the challenge with this one is you can do everything right in your own fields during the growing season. And if you have a neighbor or a farm 10 miles away that has an infestation, that weed seed can blow certainly in the fall at harvest time around and set up shop in quite a few other fields. So again, it's what I call a community weed. You really need a community-based approach to managing it. It's one that I don't think will ever fully eradicate, and it's one that's going to be a challenge for us year in and year out, just with its ability to spread and ability to find its way into our fence rows, ditch banks, roadsides, and produce seed. We're really going to have a constant seed source on this one. And really, this is a slide that I borrowed from Peter Sycamore. The tank mix that works quite well in Roundup Ready IP soybeans is Aragon plus metribuzin. So that is the most consistent tank mix that Peter's found, and he's been doing work on this weed in particular since that 2010 growing season. So a long history of looking at different herbicide combinations. But again, this has been his most consistent from a Roundup Ready or IP standpoint. And metribuzin is found in numerous premixes and tank mixes in the marketplace with other modes of action. But again, from a conventional Roundup Ready or IP system, this is really the best one to go with. And as far as post-emerge tank mix options, for Canada fleabane control in conventional or Roundup Ready scenario, there's really none available to us. First rate historically has been very sharp on Canada fleabane, but again, most populations are also Group 2 resistant as well, so it eliminates that option from our toolbox. With the Extend crop system, we have seen a strong gravitation to utilizing dicamba with Extend soybeans, and it does work quite effectively. You can see here high rate Extendamax, very good control. But again, growers that have utilized the Extend crop system, have relied on dicamba heavily within that system, but we also need to think about other effective modes of action to tank mix with dicamba in that scenario. And Peter has a nice slide here that really shows us why, control plan here And when we apply, in this scenario, Roundup Extend, you can see the growing point of this Canada fleabane plant was killed, and you can see the branching that happened in regrowth after the fact. So, dicamba is very effective. Our long-term data story would be mid-90s from a level of control, but when you have potentially a few thousand plants per square meter in the most extreme situations, mid-90s from a level of control is not sufficient, and is also putting a lot of selection pressure on that chemistry. So again, thinking about tank mix partners, the most important thing to do is start with the best foundation chemistry. So there's been quite a bit of 2,4-D promoted in the marketplace for control of Canada fleabane in Ontario. It's certainly available in numerous tank mixes and combinations, but starting off your program with 2,4-D isn't setting you up for the best chance for success, whereas dicamba is the better tank mix partner foundation chemistry to use there. And thinking about other effective tank mix partners, certainly in the BSF camp, the saflufenicil based products, so Aragon, Integrity, Optil, do work quite effectively when tank mixed with dicamba, XtendiMax, Roundup Extend, and Ingenia from BSF. Bifecta, Blackhawk, a couple of products from New Farm, other metribuzin-based herbicides do give us another effective mode of action in the tank on this particular weed. And on the corn side in Canada fleabane, I didn't put a slide up specifically talking about that, but really the other effective mode of action, one of the most effective modes of action for Canada fleabane control is tillage. Whether it's primary tillage in the fall and secondary tillage in the spring, or cultivator disc pass in the spring. A lot of our corn is still grown conventional till here in Ontario and Quebec. There's quite a bit more adoption of strip till, which may change the scenario a bit. But our Group 27 chemistry is very effective on fleabane. There's numerous options there for both pre-emerging crops. So not too worried about Canada fleabane control in corn. It's more soybeans and cereals where it's more of a challenge. And again, it has been a challenge for us for quite a number of years and will continue to do so. And the last weed that I'll talk about specifically is one that worries me quite a bit, glyphosate-resistant water hemp. This weed first showed up on Walpole Island in 2014, and this is a nice overhead picture from one of Peter Sycama's grad students, James Ferrier, who works with New Farm. A really nice overhead picture. So Peter has this trial location for numerous years now. He has corn on the left-hand side here, soybeans on the left-hand side, corn on the right-hand side in this picture, and he rotates these trial blocks year in and year out. But you can see anything here in yellow is water hemp, and you can see some of the densities in these fields or in these plots where water hemp is a challenge. But you can see, obviously don't know what each one of these plots is in particular, but there are quite a few options that Peter's done quite a bit of good work on with his grad student and technicians to help give us some options here in Ontario. So water hemp in Ontario, this is a map that was developed, I think in February. It was shared on social media from Peter and quite a few other academics, both in Ontario and Quebec, and really shows the diversity of what we're dealing with. So counties in red are 4-way resistant, so group 2, 5, 9, and 14. So again, not having much exposure to those chemistries locally, those populations were more than likely brought up from the U.S. With equipment movement or bird travel. But you can see how quickly the population is spread. 2, 5, 9, 2, 9, 14, 2 and 9, and 2 and 14. So a very diverse population that we have here in Ontario. And from 2014 to 2019, essentially, you can see the distribution that it is spread here across Ontario. And, I think a lot of it is equipment movement, bringing equipment up from the U.S. and not having it cleaned out. Again, potentially bird traffic and a few other things. And I titled this map "The Weed That Unites Us All." So regardless of which area of the country you're in, this weed is going to be a significant challenge for us going forward. First identified in a big way in 2019 in Manitoba. Tammy Jones, provincial weed specialist there, spent her summer identifying water hemp populations in quite a number of fields, and you could see the counties lit up there. We just reviewed the situation in Ontario, and then the situation in Quebec. My understanding is the first county lit up here was, I think, in 2015 or 16 when it was first identified from a grower that brought a combine up that had some weed seed in it. And then you can see, obviously, either that same population has moved or other populations have set up shop. And it's going to continue to spread. It's been on our borders for quite a number of years in the U.S. And it is, I would say, either the biggest weed challenge in the U.S. or the second biggest, depending on what area of the country you're in. And when I drove to Farm Progress Show last year down in Illinois, every prevent plant field that we passed had water hemp and Canada fleabane plants growing in it. So it is certainly spread fairly well throughout the U.S. and has driven growers' herbicide practices extensively. And I think we're just on the cusp of that happening here in Ontario and Manitoba and Quebec as well. So again, that's why it concerns me quite a bit. So the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges, is just identifying water hemp. It is an amaranth or a pigweed, part of the pigweed family. Red root pigweed, I think most of us can identify from doing the 50-mile-an-hour crop tour. But when we look at water hemp, you can see very similar leaf structure. But one thing I noticed with water hemp, it has a much waxier appearance to the leaf. So once you do train your eye to identify it, it is easier to pick out of a crowd. But the biggest differentiator is the hairs on the stem. So red root pigweed or other pigweed species will have hairs on the stems, petioles, leaves, whereas water hemp is completely hairless on both the stem and the leaf surface. So that is the easiest way to identify. Sometimes red root pigweed can have a lot of hairs, as in this picture, and other times it'll be very I guess a little bit more sparse, whereas water hemp is completely smooth. So that is probably the key distinguisher between the two. And I would say one of the challenges with water hemp in particular is it's going to be, a couple, 3 years before a grower has a high enough population to pay attention to. It may go misidentified as just a pigweed species that maybe emerged later after herbicide application. And around emergence pattern, one thing unique with water hemp and palmer and other pigweeds is they can germinate essentially season long. So this picture, or this graph here, depicts plants per meter squared that germinated from June 1st to October 25th. Peter had his grad students out every week, took the same square meter, pulled all the plants out that germinated and counted them up. And you can see the emergence pattern on this weed is tremendous, and that is why it is a season-long control program, both pre-emerge, post-emerge in crop, and also after weed harvest late into the fall. And again, even those late emerging plants, they don't necessarily get as tall or aggressive, but they can still set seed fairly aggressively. In this picture here I took last summer, I think we toured this location middle of August, and you can see, this weed's probably 4-ish inches tall, and it's got a fully formed seed head there, and takes about 2 weeks from seed head development to having viable seed within that seed head to propagate. So even those plants that emerge well into the fall will be driven to produce seed and continue to be a challenge. So some chemistry options for corn in particular here. So this would be from a pre-emerge standpoint, and regardless of which crop you're in, especially with water hemp, it needs to be a planned 2-pass approach with residuals utilized at both application timings. With kochia, fleabane, if you do a really effective job in your burn down, likely past the bulk of those weeds causing you problems. But with water hemp, again, it's going to continue to emerge throughout the season, and the use of residual chemistry is going to be very important going forward. So you can see here, these are common trade names for different chemistries and the percent level of control. The control defined by PMRA is around 80%, which really isn't commercially acceptable for most growers today. You really need to be in that 90 plus range to look from a weed control standpoint to be comfortable with what you're dealing with. So you can see Callisto, Converge, Lumax, Acuron all have group 27 chemistry in them. You can see tank mixed with atrazine. Acuron has group 15, a pair of group 27s plus atrazine. There's also group 15 here in Lumax and Integrity. So it's really a group 27, 15, 5 combination that is most effective pre-emerge in the corn system. And then post-emerge, again, dicamba group 4 works well. 27 in Armazon plus atrazine, 2,4-D works well as well. Marksman, atrazine plus dicamba, and then you can see another group 27 Callisto plus atrazine. So again, when these were applied either pre or post, nothing really gave us that high level of control, and that's really where we need to focus on a two-pass, planned two-pass approach. So again, a full pre-emerge program followed by an in-crop residual chemistry to help drive that to closer to 100% control in our corn systems. From a soybean standpoint, Peter screened the most chemistry available to us here in Canada. And you can see from boundary up to fierce, the level of control. This would be pre-applied season-long residual ratings. You can see taken out 84 days, so I think that's 7 weeks after application. Quite a bit longer. That's 10, 12 weeks after application, I guess. Fierce, again, from New Farm Camp, the best residual chemistry we have there with flumioxazin and pyroxasulfone. Triactor is a 3-way mix from New Farm. Straight metribuzin did fairly well. Authority Supreme, sulfentrazone, straight flumioxazin. So really the combination here is group 14, group 15 chemistry, and group 5 chemistry in these combinations. But again, we don't see from this standpoint a good level of control season long. We still need to follow these up with another chemistry. And really from an extend crop system standpoint, our recommendation will be following up those residuals with an early in-crop application of dicamba. So you can see Zidua, Authority Supreme, Boundary, and Fierce. We do pick up activity, and obviously it's better to start yourself off with the best option. So again, the Plan 2-Pass program gets us close to 100% control, and this is really what it looks like in the field. So untreated check, Fierce pre, followed by high rate Roundup Extend early in crop. Very clean plot here, fairly consistent. But again, in-crop options, especially if we have resistance to the group 14s, the reflex blazers of the world, we're quite limited on our in-crop options unless we're in a Liberty Link system or an Extend system. So it, again, another very challenging weed. And one thing that this picture here highlights quite well, and something I think has driven some of the U.S. challenges, just around row width. So one of the best tools at our disposal is row width in both corn and soybeans. And you can see these 30-inch rows later in season still aren't canopied, so still allowing light to penetrate that soil surface and encourage germination. But if these were 7.5 or 15-inch rows, our weed control window shortens up quite dramatically. So that's another excellent tool at our disposal. So how is this weed moving around? Again, I mentioned a few topics here. Repair shop or equipment moving. This picture is just outside of Wallacestown. Obviously, a combine started in this field, and you can see the distribution that came out the back end. Question around tillage equipment. Anytime we have soil left on our cultivator or other pieces of tillage, those seeds can move around. Flooding, it is called water hemp for a good reason. Seed will flow with water, and we have seen some populations emerge close to waterways. Migratory birds is another question mark. It's been proven that seed will survive in the gut of a bird. So if we think about migratory bird patterns from the southern U.S. up to our part of the world, potentially some of those populations came in that situation. And again, what is our next challenge going to be? So water hemp is definitely a major challenge today for the growers that are impacted and will continue to spread. And I'm hopeful that as an industry, we can slow it down as much as we can. But the next one on the doorstep in Michigan and North Dakota and a few other geographies is Palmer amaranth. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's somewhere in Canada already and we just haven't identified it. It usually takes 2 or 3 years to show up. After it shows up for us to identify it. And what concerns me with Palmer is both of these situations or populations were planted on the same day in a greenhouse. I took these pictures from St. Louis last year, and you can see the amount of growth difference between Palmer and water hemp. So again, both are dioecious weeds, big outcrossers, lots of genetic diversity, and leads to resistance developing fairly quick. So again, we'll digest water hemp as it comes, and Palmer I expect to be shortly there behind it. Just a couple comments around trait pipelines. So obviously, as Bayer Legacy Monsanto, we've spent a lot of effort with our both herbicide and insecticide trait platforms, and the market is becoming more diversity, which is a good thing, and allows or gives more growers more diverse tools in their toolbox. So this picture here from a trial in the U.S. Depicts Xtend soybeans. Xtend Flex soybeans is going to be our next trait into the marketplace here. Excuse me. In the next couple of years. Enlist was just introduced into the marketplace, I think, for 2020 growing season, and in the U.S. Liberty Link G27. So again, the G27 is tolerant to HPPDs, glufosinate or Liberty, and Roundup. Enlist is 2,4-D, Roundup, and Liberty. Xtend Flex is Liberty plus dicamba, and Roundup and Xtend soybeans is just Roundup and dicamba. So you can see we are entering a place where we'll have numerous trade options available to us, and it's really about picking the right one that fits your unique field situation and weed challenge. And just looking out a bit further, so again, mentioned Xtend Flex soybeans by adding glufosinate on our Xtend platform. We do have 4th and 5th generation traits in the marketplace, or not in the marketplace, in development. So again, stacking in HPPDs and 2,4-D with our 4th generation, and PPO with our 5th generation. So again, we're not adding new novel modes of action from a tolerance standpoint, but trying our best to mix and match chemistry options for the challenges that lie ahead. And our corn pipeline looks very similar as far as modes of action that we have. So again, the marketplace is going to get busy, has gotten a lot busier, and as our weed challenges continue to evolve, ourselves and lots of other companies are doing our best to stay ahead of the curve. So last section here, what resources are available to us. So Manage Resistance Now is a crop life initiative. Lots of good resources there around herbicide, insecticide, and fungicide resistance. They launched their campaign a couple of years ago. There is a website that you can go to for information. Really good resources there. In Ontario, Mike Kober, our provincial specialist, has done a great job to lead this project, but trying to visualize all the herbicide resistance testing over the years and put it into a map format so we can have an idea of what weed populations exist where, not specific to glyphosate, but really all species and modes of action. You could see lots of testing even back to the late 80s. Francois Tardif at University of Guelph leads a lot of this effort. So again, trying to visualize that in Ontario, make it more user-friendly. A new project or effort and very collaborative effort between OMAF, Ag Canada, University of Guelph, and really utilized in Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba is a quick test for identifying genetic markers within the weeds. So this is one I'm quite excited about. Instead of spraying a weed, waiting for it not to die, and then letting it go to seed and cause problems into the future, I think this is potentially an opportunity where you can grab a leaf sample, send it away to a lab. They'll do a quick confirmation on the genetic makeup of that weed and what potential markers it has for herbicide resistance, and hopefully be able to give you real-time or in-season confirmation of what it is, and hopefully some management options around that. So this one again is being developed. It's been quite a few years in the works, and it's a very good example of quite a strong collaborative effort in our academic community here in Canada. So we'll see where that one evolves to. From our camps, so our MixUp Platform. So again, our MixUp Platform is kind of our umbrella brand for all things resistance focused. Legacy Monsanto, we had Monsanto Crop Management Solutions, which has been rolled into this platform. So there is quite a bit of information available. Again, I mentioned earlier about our marketing programs around Bear Value and having some key tank mix options in there for the challenges that we have today. So I do encourage you to utilize those resources and have a look at that website. And the last slide here as I finish up, just around some final thoughts. So herbicide resistance doesn't necessarily drive our management decisions yet. Certainly everybody's in a different spot as far as their personal operations, but one day it potentially will. And I would say Canada is still a yield-first market where we're not making concessions on what we're growing or the crop rotations that we have at our disposal to focus on herbicide resistance management. But I think with water hemp spreading fairly quick, that's going to really drive our herbicide patterns here in the near future. The next one there is, how do we change our culture of pushing the easy button? So I mentioned, and it's grower behavior, I guess human behavior to sometimes or most of the time take the easy button. It is, challenging to look at your balance sheet and look at that extra spend for adding another effective mode of action to the tank. But from a long-term sustainability is really where we need to move to from away from short-term economics. So again, that's to me the challenge. We've spent a lot of time talking about this topic, really back to the 80s before my time. We are moving the needle, but our challenges, I think, are quickly outstripping our options, or potentially outstripping our options. And what are the other options we have at our disposal? So was one of the pre-questions that came in, but certainly from an integrated weed management standpoint, I touched on crop rotations being very effective, tillage, depending on the weed you're dealing with. There has been quite a bit of good work done by some academics, grad student projects around cover crops. I would say the most recent one, cereal rye, utilized fall planted to slow down Canada fleabane establishment. There's certainly some good results there. The weed Zapper, a bit of a new technology. Some of you may have not have heard of it. There is a grower in my neighborhood, an organic farmer, that bought one of these last year. And essentially what it is a generator on the back of a tractor, PTO driven, essentially energizes a bar here at the front, and it shoots. Basically, the plant becomes the conductor, and it shoots electricity through that plant and burns out the vascular tissue. So, this was developed in the U.S., southern U.S., where they have big challenges with palmer and water hemp. And I think, this one in particular, I can see having quite a bit of functionality in those situations where really you're up against the wall, and it's either this or something like hand weeding in those scenarios. And then the last one, just around the seed Terminator. This technology, I think, was started in Australia. There is some good work being done in Western Canada looking at this, working with Ag Canada, brand Tiedemann and growers out there. But this one essentially separates the chaff coming out of the combine from the straw and puts that chaff through a hammer mill to basically grind up any weed seeds that went through that combine. Certainly has some good applicability for certain weed species, not everything, but weeds that hang onto their seeds right through till harvest, and we can get with combine head. I think this has had some applicability and certainly has quite a decent foothold in Australia. So I think with that, that's what I wanted to cover today. I felt like I talked a mile a minute, but hopefully some of that resonated with you and picked up a couple quick tips there. And certainly we'll open it up for questions here, but if you have any specific questions, you can see my contact info there, my email, phone number, and my Twitter handle. I am fairly active on social media, so if you want to get a hold of me, that's probably the best way. And I think with that, Michelle, we'll open it up for questions.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Adam, for the great presentation. We've got a handful of questions here, so we'll just kind of dive in. First off, I'm in Manitoba, so I am interested in that increasing spread of, water hemp and kochia here, of course, but can you touch on just how important the residual chemistries are going to be, and what's the impact on carryover concerns?
Yeah, and that's something that certainly I think about a lot, and lots of other companies and folks do. But in Western Canada, with potentially limited rainfall, certainly the last few years, very limited rainfall in most of the geography, cool soils, frozen conditions most of the year, quite a bit of the year. Breakdown of residual chemistries can be hampered or slowed down. But I would say, as we move into the space, especially with water hemp, where the use of residual chemistry is going to be very important to stay ahead of that weed and do our best to combat it. I think we're going to have to get better and maybe a little bit more flexible in our crop rotations and considering, how to make corn, soy, cereals, canola, dry beans work together in a rotation. Certainly economics, crop prices drive what we plant in our fields each year. But when we start dealing with weeds like water hemp, it's probably going to shift that management level to worrying about what herbicides you're using to control that weed and what crop options you have to plant behind it. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over the next number of years, but our ability to be flexible in what we're planting and recropping too. I know atrazine's used fairly extensively across Western Canada, can certainly hamper canola recrop. Products like Group 27s and others that are very effective on water hemp and have good kochia activity, may start to handcuff us from having the flexibility that we want. But that's kind of where my thoughts are on that question.
For sure, thanks. Can you quickly touch on, how tillage can also be used to combat the three weeds you spoke about today?
Yeah, I touched on briefly throughout, but a weed like Canada fleabane, I think a lot of us forget or maybe don't appreciate is tillage is very effective on that weed. So once fleabane sets its seed, quite a high percentage of that seed germinates in the fall if conditions are right, or in the springtime. And fairly aggressive tillage, so something more aggressive than a light vertical tillage pass can be quite effective at thinning that population out. A weed like kochia germinates super early in the spring. Tillage can help take out what's emerged, and potentially, some others will come in behind it. But initial takedown of that weed. But a plant like water hemp, tillage encourages germination to happen. It's no different than any other pigweed species or warm season annual broadleaf, where we warm up the soil, sun contacts the soil, and it's kind of game on from a growth standpoint. So certainly tillage can help take out what's there, but it's going to encourage more to come on too. So may not be the best situation for that weed in particular.
Okay, thanks. Got a couple audience questions here. Jim's just curious about what about group 3 in soybeans as another mode of action?
Yeah, I'll be honest, that's one that I'm not overly familiar with, and one that has come up in conversation a little bit. I believe if I'm thinking the proper active or chemistry, be Edge, Avidex, those chemistries are making a comeback. Certainly, wild oats developed broad resistance to the group 3s. Now that those populations, group 3 resistant populations anyway, are maybe disappeared a little bit from our seed banks, those chemistries are being more effective again. But yeah, certainly anything that we can have at our disposal, I think we need to consider. But as far as specific activity, I'd have to dig into that a little bit further.
Okay, great, thanks. And just one last question before we wrap it up. Final thoughts on the long-term global R&D pipeline and the ability to actually stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I touched on that a couple times in the presentation, but it's the challenge I think we have, especially in the herbicide world, is trying to come up with combinations and products to keep us ahead of weeds developing resistance. And I always take it back to the fact that Mother Nature is very adaptable. Her job is to survive and adapt, and she's very good at doing that. Our trait pipeline is going to be stacking numerous tolerances on the same trait, not new modes of action, but just giving growers the flexibility to use them potentially in different crops, pre-post options. But it's difficult to discover new chemistry and bring it to market. Regulatory tolerances around things like toxicology or toxicity kill a lot of chemistry out of the gates. And I think the chemistry we introduced a few months ago in our investor deck, I think was the first unique mode of action that made it to the next phase of development in over 30 years from a Bayer standpoint. So, I think the R&D investment, once glyphosate-resistant weeds started showing up and are becoming more prevalent, has ramped up from a discovery standpoint. But we still need to be very aware and utilize the tools that we have at our disposal today to try and stay ahead of the curve. But in the southern U.S., where you have 6- and 7-way resistance to herbicides, some of those growers are resorting to roving crews going out and hand pulling weeds in those situations. So to me, that scares me a lot. And as we move into this water hemp world with 4-way resistance already here in Ontario and 2- and 3-way in Quebec and Manitoba, we're already well down the road of having those same challenges.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thanks for expanding on that. So we're going to wrap this up for today, but if you have any further questions following the presentation, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll connect you with Adam, or you can see his contact information still on the screen there as well. Just a reminder that this webinar has been approved for 1 credit in crop management. So if you did not submit your CCA number when registering, please email your first and last name and CCA number to webinars@annexbusinessmedia.com. Further instructions will also be found in our follow-up email, which will hold the recording of the webinar. Thanks again to you, Adam, and to all of our attendees for tuning into today's webinar. Don't forget to visit topcropmanager.com/webinars to view all of our previously recorded webinars and register for our 3rd webinar of this series about cover crops happening on April 8th. One last special thanks to Mix It Up by Bayer Crop Science for sponsoring our session today. From seed to harvest, Bayer is focused on delivering top performing solutions to address some of your toughest farm challenges. Wishing you, your teams, and all of your families all of the best right now. Stay healthy and have a great rest of your day, everyone.